We always do. That's the beauty of it.
Exactly.
Hey, welcome into Vertical Pursuit. Mike Barrett, Pastor Mike Tatlock. Episode 88. That's what this is. Not that it matters to anybody else, but just in terms of keeping track of where we are. We're closing in on the big 100. I'm not sure what we'll have to do.
We got to do a special edition.
Some kind of special edition.
Special edition.
Maybe like from that'll be about elk hunting time. We could do one from a hunt or something.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Maybe
out in the wild.
Be thinking about that. We have talked about this in recent episodes, but we're further along now, and in your sabbatical, Pastor Mike is on sabbatical, and the reason why we don't just say that to say it. Although it is interesting, because the whole concept of sabbatical is interesting, especially as a pastor and a leader of a lot of people and of a shepherd a little bit. And it's been great to walk with you through the stages. And I don't want you to get too deep into this yet because I want to do more on this later. But how you doing? Are you hanging in there?
Doing great. I mean, you and I were just talking about it before we jump into this. We were sitting here probably like 45 minutes just catching up, but yeah, we're coming into the kind of the last few weeks, I guess it is. Yeah, we're coming back.
Turn your mic down a little bit.
Here, how's that sound?
Point it down at your
face. A little bit better.
Like yeah, there you go.
There we go.
So I'll make sure you're good. Yeah.
There you go.
Last few weeks,
Mr. Producer.
Does it? I know. Does it feel?
Yeah, we're here. It was about a 2.5 month sabbatical. We're just 3 weeks, I think, away from coming back. And we were just talking here, not everybody can do a sabbatical. I understand that. You and I were just talking about this in some pretty deep layers here just a few minutes before we went on air. But, the idea of a Sabbath is something that everybody's supposed to practice anyways. And this is nothing new. People have been writing about this the last several years. But, the Lord rested on the seventh day to set in motion. And then you got the religious leaders who idolized the Sabbath and made it a burden to people, made it something oppressive and legalistic. And so then you look at our culture. Our culture here in the West is so fast paced. And, what's crazy is back during COVID, I talked with a lot of people. There's a lot of, negative stuff with COVID, especially things that governments were doing. And we can get into that. We've talked a lot about what really was going on. But in terms of exactly, it's don't follow it's true though. It's true. And it's coming into light now.
I know.
Things that you and I talked about 4 or 5 years ago, or now it's like, we were conspiracy theorists, and now we're like, well, what are you going to say now? It's come to find out it was all true. But what was crazy was how many people, where I was going with that was how many people during COVID were forced to slow down.
Yeah.
Because everything got canceled. I'm not saying that was all good. There's way more negative things out of COVID. But one of the things that was positive, I heard from a lot of people, was it empowered their ability to say no. Because all the extracurricular things got canceled. Again, those aren't good for the long run. I'm just saying it was a moment to put some things on pause. And all of a sudden people were like, man, our calendar got a lot slimmer because they weren't allowed to do a bunch of stuff. And they kind of, wait a minute. And then as soon as COVID was over, we went right back to the race, right back to the treadmill, right back to sprinting and hustling and, just keeping up with everything. And I don't know what it is, but we are obsessed with busyness. And so it makes it hard to do a Sabbath thing, sabbatical. Yeah. I took 2.5 months or I'm almost finished with that, but not everybody can do that, but you can figure out different rhythms of your life to where you can put some things on pause. And it's hard. It's very hard because the demand's there. In fact, we'll do a whole podcast on this because I've written some things on what are the things. Here's a teaser. One of my takeaways from my sabbatical was, what does it mean to live life at the pace of abiding? And
you've been stuck on that word abiding a lot.
A lot. It was something that came up a lot a year ago for me as a personal challenge, but during this sabbatical time was a chance to do a deep dive on it. But I feel like that's been a big one, is go at the pace of abiding, which we'll do a whole podcast on what that means. But my point is everything else tries to set the pace for our lives. And I've journaled probably 15 things in our lives that try to force us into its pace. And before you know it, you're caught in a pace that's wearing you out. You're tired, you're exhausted, or you're not even tired or exhausted. You might thrive on that. Some people are like, I need busyness because I feel alive with that. So it's not even about how busy I am. I think that's not the point. It's, are you truly living from the deep place that God wants us to do, whether you have a busy schedule or not? So abiding has nothing to do with even just how packed your calendar is. It's more than that, because I can eliminate my calendar right now and still not be abiding or going at the pace of abiding. So we'll talk about that in another podcast.
Well, it's been there's a lot to unpack, and I even want to, I'm looking forward to doing an episode shortly after your return.
Yeah.
To see what has changed for you. And like you mentioned, I mean, if, we all know people who are workaholics, and I think those people realize that they're out of balance when they're in that world. And I've known workaholics where it's like, yeah, I know I need to, but yet it's not a positive thing.
Yeah.
And so as you mentioned with, you compared it to COVID, which is a really good comparison, a forced break, which is what a sabbatical should be, is a forced break. And I have been really happy that for you, with as many hats as you wear and being a first responder, as we have said, to so many people, and I've seen your phone, and I know you get 8,000 texts a day and calls, and not that you don't care now, I'm just saying, but to the forced break in that, for you to be able to, for lack of a better term, disappear, has been, because you've been, and again, I don't want to get into all this now and waste what we were going to do, but it's been good to see that you've been able to step back. Yeah. Put it that way.
Well, and I've done the work that you're supposed to do. We were just saying, we have a mutual friend who told me before I went on my sabbatical, he said, there are things that you're going to get out of your sabbatical that you won't even know 6 to 8 months from now, that you will look back and go, oh, that's what I got. And I have resources that have helped me walk through a sabbatical, because I needed that. I didn't know, when you're going to sabbatical, I've heard, so many friends who've done it, and they'll give you all their advice, and that's great, but it's different for everybody. What works for good for someone is different. It might not work for you. And so I have my own game plan. It's been good. I've got resources that have guided me through it. So I've popped the hood. I've done the deep work. And so I feel like I've made the most of that. But a point of it being is that I just told you that before we were recording, there's a process that you can go through in a sabbatical that anybody can do, even if they don't take 2.5 months off. And it's that inner work of your heart, your soul, your identity, all that kind of good stuff, that I don't think people get into that as much as we probably should. So for me, it was great to disappear, and spend more time. Really, it was kind of spend more time with the Lord. That's spend a lot of time with my family.
You had the discipline to disappear.
Yeah,
and that isn't the case for very many people. And I've compared this a little bit to my past career in life. The only thing I did was in sportscaster and all this stuff and being on TV, and to come out of that world, and then we were all removed. It wasn't my decision, but to see how I would react to that, and that was 8-9 years ago. And I would still say I'm discovering areas where I wasn't in balance. And now, could I have gone and just continued that until retirement? Yes. Was that the plan? Yes. But it's amazing when you are forced into something, and I'm not saying a sabbatical is that, although it's similar in that it exposes a lot about yourself that you didn't necessarily know because you didn't have time to know it.
Yeah. I think one of the things, there's definitely, we'll do another podcast later on maybe a lot of the revelations I got, and yes, probably some I won't see for 6 months from now, but there's definitely takeaways for me personally. That has happened. I got pages of journal notes or whatever on that. But one of my biggest takeaways is and I don't want to be overcritical because that's not the tone I want to set, but you see how the church, and I'm talking as a pastor and as believers, we have created church to be a commodity. And I think that is one of the things that I will try to bring back some fresh perspective on is we've made Jesus something we consume, and we've made church a commodity. And what that does is it creates the audience as consumers and the staff as producers. And so you have to always, if that is consumption is what we're doing and it's a commodity, then there's a race that goes with that. And you just got to keep producing. You got to keep producing. And I'm not talking about shepherding people who are going through conflict and discipleship. I'm just saying I'm pretty convinced the Western church has become a commodity. And we're just... People have said this, but I've spent more time thinking, reflecting on this, and getting fresh insights on how do we hunger and thirst for God, but not from a consumer standpoint. And we've created the church to just constantly be about consuming what's new. What's the next trend? What's the next thing? And I there's a whole podcast I'll do on the difference between soul formation and spirit formation. And I think the church is focused, unfortunately, more on soul formation, and that sounds semantical, but the point of it being is we've made it about entertaining, and I need to be intellectually stimulated. I need to be emotionally moved. I need to be intellectually stimulated. I need to be emotionally moved, and I need all my needs met, and I need this. And I go, we've created this beast, and it needs to be fed, and it has an appetite that's ferocious, and it's broken. And so there's some thoughts I have on that. I'm not saying I have a plan to figure it all out, but I have fresh insights on, man, this isn't working the way I think Jesus, when he talked about thriving and flourishing and peace and abiding, all that kind of stuff, we've created something that works against us. It's not in partnership with what I think God, Jesus intended for the church. So I don't know. I'll see where that goes when I come back, but.
Yeah, you just laid out about 9 episode ideas, which is good. So people have asked me before, how do you come up with the topics? I'm like, we don't. They just, there's a million more. They just land in our lap, just like any good conversation.
It's just like this. You and I just sit here and do this. Well, okay, so the topic, one of the things we want to talk about today, which yesterday we were like, hey, let's record tomorrow. And you're like, hey, here's some thoughts. And you listed, I think, maybe 3 or 4 thoughts, but one of them came out of a devotional.
Yeah,
that you just did with
a
good friend. Yeah, I love it because we sit here. You always have great. Every time before we do an episode, I love the things that God's been stirring on your heart, and there's a few things we'll talk about. We're going to film another episode when we're done recording this one, so we'll get into that stuff. But this thing on Ecclesiastes is crazy. You texted me last night, and you're like, "Hey, I just finished doing this devotional with Ryan, right?"
Yeah,
and you're like, hey, what about Ecclesiastes? And I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about Ecclesiastes forever. What was that like for you?
Well,
like,
he picked it out of the, and it's funny how you, and I'll get to this in a roundabout way, and it's going to be kind of a funny way that I think I'll go into this. I was reminded this week. Well, it's been a tough stretch of time, especially really close stretch of time for kids of the 80s.
Yeah, no kidding.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Yep.
Hulk Hogan. And then if you want to go back a few months, Toby Keith and Phil Robertson. I mean,
Theo.
Theo from the Cosby Show. There's it's been weird. And you realize, and people these days, I don't think the youth of today don't understand this. And I know, sorry to say that again, because I know younger people are like rolling their eye. Oh, here's the old man telling me walk to school uphill both ways. And it's not that. It's just that I saw somebody on X or Twitter the other day say that, who's around my age, our age, where he said you don't understand how things were when we had 3 TV channels or 4. Celebrity was bigger, and you didn't get back then without social media and only with, and this isn't always a great thing, these people they were what they were in the brief time you saw them, but then you built up in your mind what they really were and how they impacted you. And so, I mean, professional wrestling, and I'm not a huge pro wrestling guy, although if you're from the Northwest was a real big hotbed for pro wrestling, especially in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of these guys came through Portland. And, the old Channel 12, you only had 3 shows, and Portland Wrestling was one of them. And anybody who's from here is going to know what I'm talking about. And then they would tour the state, and they were incredible showmen. And my dad being a basketball coach, they would go to the high school basketball coaches or athletic directors, and they would rent your gym. So every week when they did Portland Wrestling, they were setting up the next week. Yep. And everything ended with a cliffhanger. And boy, next week when I see you in Coos Bay, I'm going to... And then they would sell the tickets to Coos Bay. And people would show up. But every Saturday night, it was televised. It was on Channel 12. And it was this brilliant thing. Anyway... That's what kind of got me into it. But then in the 80s, with limited choices on TV, the WWF then, now it's the WWE, was, Hulk Hogan was just this bigger than life persona. And, Andre the Giant and all of these things and all of these they would sell out arenas, not coliseums, but domes for these WrestleManias. And Hulk became, he was kind of like Gene Simmons from Kiss. He was a master marketer. So everybody knew him. Everybody. I think he was probably one of the most famous and recognizable personalities in the world.
Absolutely.
Really was. And this was at a time when you had, your sports were, they started Monday Night Baseball for a while on ABC, which I loved, but you got the game of the week on Saturday. And, you had Monday Night Football and you had a couple of games on Sunday. That's it.
Yeah.
You didn't have, and you couldn't record them. It just, they were live or you missed them.
Yep.
And so it was just interesting to go back and see some of these personalities, the wide world of sports on Saturday with Howard Cosell.
Oh my gosh.
These people that became so massive in your life. And I didn't really like Cosell, but he was always there as more, he was a character. But Hogan was that. So then all these years later, as Terry, his real name, as he gets older, we start to realize and see these things about him. Then he passes away. And I'd seen a lot of these things about him, even in the last couple of years, where he had come to this point in his life where he realized he had been chasing the wind.
Yep.
And he got baptized at 70, went all in for the Lord. I mean, wearing shirts, John 3:16, and crosses around his neck. Not to an unhealthy or look at me, but just to say...
It was a platform, too.
It was massive platform. But he wasn't doing it for profit. And Roddy Piper, who's from Portland, who I actually had a chance to spend time with, Roddy, he and his son.
No way.
Yeah, and I have a photo because I knew these guys back then from when I was a kid, because Roddy wrestled in Portland, then made it really big on the WWF.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I happened to be at an event, and Roddy was there, and I guess had watched some Blazers, and it was humbling to me that he knew who I was. I was like, whoa, Roddy Piper. And this was years later. This was not very long before he passed away. And but had a chance to talk to he and his son and spend a little bit of time with him. Well, Roddy found the Lord. And Hulk, if you read some of the stuff on social media, and a lot of this stuff is really flying up now, certainly after somebody passes, you start to hear all these stories. And Hulk said that he hated Roddy when they were wrestling. They were rivals. Wrestling is predetermined, obviously, and they're actors. But he said legitimately they didn't like each other. But he said as they both retired and started to get older, they became really, really close friends. And he said toward the end of Roddy's life, he was relying on Hulk, Terry, to explain the gospel to him. And he said they had these incredibly in-depth conversations. And in fact, something really weird, and I'll share this. I think I might have sent it to you. But Hulk shares a story on an interview where Roddy was asking him questions, but never bought fully in. He kind of was, but he was more curious and sensed something was missing in his life. And Hulk tells the story of Roddy never taking the initiative to really speak to him, more just ask questions. And Terry, or I should keep calling him Terry, Hulk Hogan, would tell him little things. Well, Roddy dies and which a lot of these wrestlers have died. They're just to completely abuse their bodies. A lot of it with drugs, steroids. We all know that, and a lot of them admit that. But Hulk tells a story of Roddy had died, and 2 days after his death, he gets a voicemail on his phone, and it's from Roddy Piper. 2 days after he was dead, and Hulk said, I'm not one of those guys that doesn't check my phone all the time. I check my phone every day. And he said, the message was, he said, Roddy wasn't speaking right into the phone, but he could hear him in the message, the taped message. And he said, my brother, I just wanted to tell you I am good and I'm walking with Jesus.
Wow.
And the interviewer had chills. And Hulk said, that is not something he would have said to me while alive, especially in the condition he was in late. So make of that what you will. It's a pretty cool story. But my point in a lot of that stuff, when speaking of all of these things I'm reading and watching now, because I'm, my algorithm picks up that I start watching this stuff on Hulk Hogan, so I'm getting it all. A lot of these interviews he has done in the last 2 or 3 years, and his baptism is the video.
I saw that. Watch that video.
It's everywhere of when he got baptized. But was him sitting around and basically saying, I couldn't take it anymore. My questions were all unanswered. My life was unfulfilled, and I felt like I was doing nothing but chasing the wind. I had it all. I had the money, the fame. I went through times when I was sick, and I had 10 back surgeries, which is what he had. So I know it sounds funny to tie Hulk Hogan to Ecclesiastes, but everything he was saying in these interviews lately are what Solomon was saying in Ecclesiastes, a guy who had been through and walked a lot of the same path in terms of having, limitless bank account, women, parties, every need met, houses, everything else.
He had it all.
And here he's at the end, and we've all been told this over time. You can't take it with you. It's going to be meaningless in the end. Here's a guy telling you that in his last 2 years of life, who finally found filling in the Lord, finally went, I'm done with all of this stuff. It is doing nothing for me. It's done nothing for me. And now I've found the one thing that truly is meaningful in my life, and it's my walk with Jesus, and I want to tell as many people about it as possible. Hulk Hogan, of all people. It's crazy to me. And some of the verbiage he has been using in these interviews before he passed tragically of a heart attack at 71, shortly after being baptized, is incredible in the way it aligns to Ecclesiastes.
Well, and you see that now in Hulk, because his was really, he was very open about his faith and that transition. And you see this now with a lot of, especially you and I at our age, you talk about the 80s, kids of the 80s, which is probably the best era.
Oh my gosh.
I make a big case about how that probably was the best era.
I saw it before. I'm going to interrupt you because I saw a guy tweeted this the other day, a guy I follow on social media, a big guy, he's followed by a lot of people. He says, quote, I'm not one of these everything was better back in my day people, but I cannot properly describe how much different the 80s were than what we have today. It was fun and happy and patriotic and ridiculous and over the top. It was wonderful, and Hulk Hogan was a huge part of it.
That's good.
And it was said very well.
Oh, I remember. WWF was always, that was it as a kid. And going to school and you're reenacting the moves, and so it got a little crazy. Saturday morning cartoons, you'd get up and you're watching Hulk and you're watching Andre the Giant, Princess Bride, one of the best movies out there at that time. And kids are showing up wearing Hulkmania stuff and ripping shirts. And I remember we did all that kind of stuff. But there was something about that era. And I know every generation probably say this, but there was a lot of great things about being an 80s kid. But what's fascinating now is those of us that grew up in the 80s, and especially the celebrities that we watched from the 80s, that now they're in their 80s. That's the fascinating thing.
Yeah.
The celebrities of the 80s are now in their 80s. Mm-hmm. And many of them are having that awakening. If you will, the Ecclesiastes awakening.
Yeah.
To go, man, what have I been chasing? Nothing. It's fleeting. It's gone. It wasn't satisfying. It didn't fill my soul, my heart, none of those things. And so it's crazy watching. And I know some people wouldn't even recognize it, but I think you and I, we pay attention to people who are in positions of influence and platform. And it's powerful when they're speaking about, this is the life I lived and chased after this, and it was fleeting and, chasing the wind. But now, so coming back to Ecclesiastes, what was your takeaway? Like when you just went through it with Ryan, what were some things you took away?
The funny thing is we have a mutual friend, and I was complaining about business issues and waiting to get paid and money and worrying about money like we all do, but been an interesting stretch for me, but just being let down over and over and over again, and the stress that comes with that. And then in a father's role as a provider, and I talked about in my previous life, I never made a ton of money, but I never had to think of it because I was on contracts. The check just shows up once a month in the mailbox. Well, now I'm in a different role where these projects that I don't know how I get into some of the stuff I'm in, but the projects that I'm in are, it's just different. It's sporadic. And therefore, in the midst of all of this worry, I had a friend say, one time when I was going through something, when I was really worried about finances, he said his wife called him and said, "Would you please just read Ecclesiastes and go to bed?" And he said, "What does that mean?" She said, "Just read it. Go read Ecclesiastes and go to bed." So he challenged me with that same thing. So I read Ecclesiastes, and I show up for breakfast the next day, and I said, "Why did you have me read that, man? It's inspiring, but it's a little bit depressing at the same time." And some people think it's kind of a pessimistic look at, until you read it for about the 8th time, or until you go into a devotional about it and see it taken apart, and you start to see what Solomon was trying to tell us in Ecclesiastes. And the vanity of all vanities he talks about early on, and how things are meaningless, and how all of this was chasing the wind. And he talks about the toil concerning work that we do as humans, and all of these pursuits, wealth, pleasure, work, wisdom, and they don't deliver lasting satisfaction. You're chasing temporary satisfaction, like he says, chasing the wind, which is basically what we have to come to the reality, maybe at our age. And what we saw Hulk Hogan doing was talking about, man, all of these things were fleeting. They were temporary. I was chasing the wind. That's what Solomon was saying in Ecclesiastes. And it isn't a call to despair, which is, I think, is the way Ecclesiastes can come off as your first run through it. But it's a call to look beyond the material, is what it is.
Yes.
And it basically, what it does, Solomon has tested life's offerings. In 2 verse 1 through 11, he talks about how he indulged in wine, women, projects, and the result, empty. So that's pleasure. In wisdom, which is 2:12 through 17, he pursues knowledge, but he finds it limited. Both wise and foolish, they end up in the same place. They die. Work, he builds an empire, Solomon, and then he realizes he's going to leave it to others who might just squander it. And then time and seasons, life's cycles, birth, death, joy, sorrow, they're inevitable.
Yep.
Governed by God's timing and not ours. And then injustice, he laments life's unfairness. Good people suffer, wicked prosper. That's the way it is. That's in verse 4, 1 through 13, and also in 8, verse 14. So the methodical testing shows a mind in Solomon wrestling with reality, not just preaching. That's the difference with Ecclesiastes verse. And I never really gave much of a mind to Ecclesiastes. I just didn't. You go through books and you read it and you read a couple lines and go, okay, I get it. And you move on to the next one. And I'm guilty of that. But the reason why I would urge you to dive into Ecclesiastes, because it's not preaching. It invites you to question your own pursuits.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's good.
And it doesn't shy away from contradictions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are some. And in our Bible study Wednesday, we talked a lot about these contradictions between James 2 and Romans. What Paul was saying versus what James was saying. And at first blush, they can come off as contradictions.
Yeah.
But you realize they're more complementary than they are contradictions. So the contradictions in Ecclesiastes are kind of, on the one hand, he's saying, life is meaningless.
Yeah.
Life is meaningless. Yet, God gives purpose. It says wisdom is better than folly, but it doesn't guarantee success.
Yep. Yeah.
It says death levels everyone, yet life is a gift.
Yeah.
So it's unresolved in its nature, Ecclesiastes is, which is unlike a lot of books, which is why I kind of like it.
Yeah.
Because Solomon isn't saying, I have all the answers. He's saying, I only have one answer. And it's almost Socrates-like. And he says, I don't know.
Yeah.
All that I know is that I don't know, but I know I've been chasing the wrong things. And I've had all the success. I haven't had to worry about anything.
Yeah.
Like, again, I haven't had to worry about finances. I've had it all, man. I had wives and massive ditty parties at my pad, and it's been nuts. And none of that stuff satisfies.
Yeah.
Neither does all the wisdom I've tried to achieve. Neither does all the businesses and the vineyards and the workers and everything I've produced. It's meaningless at this point. And you can see his emotion through this book. That's the cool thing. And not necessarily a confident emotion.
Yeah.
Whereas most guys, especially Paul, he preaches with this absolute confidence, this rock solid, I'm sitting in prison, but man, I am good and I have learned to live. That's not what Solomon's saying here. Yeah. Solomon's saying, I don't get it. I'm telling you, the wisdom in this is to enjoy the moment. He talks about that in 2, eat, drink, find joy in daily life, gratitude for simple pleasures. They anchor us, work hard. He says, do what's in front of you with diligence, even if it feels fleeting. He talks about, and toward the end, fear God. He ties it together with reverence for God, keeping his commands, give life a framework. They do, even when details are unclear. So what this is, to me, these are platitudes and insights that he has achieved, and he's seen it all.
Yeah.
He has seen it all.
Yeah.
So there's wisdom in what he says. That's why we listen to him.
What's crazy about that was Solomon was a guy that God gave a blank check to. It's the only guy that God ever gave a blank check to, meaning, what do you want? I'll give it to you. I mean, can you imagine that? And I always think, like, what would I do if God handed me a blank check and said, what do you want? Fill in the blank. And Solomon asked for wisdom. And he could have asked for money. He could have asked for a lot of stuff, but he got wisdom. And what was fascinating was wisdom became a means to all those other things, and which it can do that. You know, wisdom can be a perspective that sets you up for the benefits of everything else.
How many really smart people do we know, really crafty, smart people are so destructive?
Oh my gosh. And that's the hard part is to what end? And I think that's where what I love about Ecclesiastes, it asks this question: to what end are you living your life? That's when I read Ecclesiastes. That is my nutshell. To what end are you? I think it's in is it chapter 2 where it says God plants eternity in the hearts, and it's this idea that God puts that eternal compass in us, that we're created for something more. And yet we try to fill that direction with temporal things, not eternal things. And so we chase after the temporal, the things that are fleeting, the things that do pass away. And they have their moments and they have their momentary pleasures and benefits. What I love about Ecclesiastes is he also says there's a place for some of that. Not sin, we're not talking about that. But there's a place to go. Enjoy the little things in life.
Oh, sure.
Just keep it in the right perspective.
Eat, drink, find joy.
Yeah.
He says it.
What we do, though, is I take something that's meant to be a blessing and I turn it into an idol. So then I turn it into joy and pleasure is the pursuit. It is the end game. It is the final goal. And that's what we do as the human race is we take something that's meant to be temporal, but we make it the eternal goal. Instead of when you fear God, and that's not like fear God is like God's the boogeyman, he's out for me, and he's really angry. It's not that kind of fear. It's keep things in the right perspective and live in a way that you want to honor the Lord and make sure he's first. And then everything else has its rightful place. So I tell people this all the time. You can enjoy things. Enjoy this and enjoy it. You don't have to live the Christian life like this monk that's stoic and woe is me and I'm going to be about this self, painful, agonizing existence, and because anything that's pleasurable is sinful and wrong. And no, it's not that. It's just, but when we turn pleasures into our ultimate chase, and we believe those pleasures are going to fill us and satisfy everything inside of us, it doesn't. But when they have their proper place, it's a gift from God. It's even, you can even begin to see God in those things, the little subtle things. But what was your takeaway when you came out of it and reading Ecclesiastes? Did it reframe anything for you? If people are listening right now going, wow, I've never maybe even read Ecclesiastes, and you just did a phenomenal job of summarizing and capturing that. What's like your takeaway from that? Did it cause you to think anything differently?
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, in some ways I say this a lot, but it gives you license a little bit. It gave me license to go, this guy didn't have it all figured out.
It's kind of reassuring.
Yeah. Well, it's what they call, I think, it's more of part of the Bible's wisdom literature.
Yeah, it is.
Similar to Proverbs and Job.
That's right.
While Proverbs offers principles for living well, and I just did a devotional on Proverbs, went through the whole thing. Ecclesiastes questions whether those principles always work. It really does in a way. And it's written very, very much from a human standpoint.
Yeah.
So he uses the phrase under the sun. Mm-hmm. Everything under 29 times he uses under the sun in this book, which is very interesting. So it does make you reflect on your pursuits, makes you reflect on your limits, your joys, your faith. And of course, I guess the biggest thing to answer your question is what I'm pursuing going to last?
Wow.
And then what are you chasing? That's what it asks you. And that's where maybe the perspective I get in that. Are you chasing money, status, knowledge, or are you chasing some kind of security that you think is out there that you don't have right now, or some kind of identity that is probably out of whack? And the other thing I think did for me is it reminds me that we don't control everything.
Yeah.
Which, can you truly surrender to God's sovereignty? Are you equipped to do that? Are you in a position in your life where you're able to do that? And then it also talks a lot about faith. I mean, it just talks about meaning comes from aligning with God's purposes, not from solving every mystery. And that's Ecclesiastes to me it's a mirror to confront your assumptions.
Ooh.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. That's good.
And what I like about it again is that I say this a lot, but it is it's one of those time-tested books where his principles and what he was struggling with I know I opened it and it sounds funny with Hulk Hogan, but I saw the same things Hulk Hogan was saying on the interviews in his final days before he passed. A lot of it is the exact same stuff Solomon was saying.
Yeah.
Two guys who had been there and lived it and done it all, and they're in the same position saying all of this was fleeting. Now Hulk's a little more, it's not that Solomon isn't optimistic. He is, but he is, I don't know, from the way that you can read it being melancholy.
Yeah.
He's down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
He's kind of at the end of himself, just going, dude, I've wasted so much time. Whereas Hulk, the way he spoke toward the end was he's reinvigorated.
Yeah, he's come alive.
He's come alive.
Yeah, exactly.
He's come alive. And I'm not saying Solomon wasn't, but like you said, through his great wisdom and his ability to chase down so many of these things, he just seems at the end just like, jeez, I got it all wrong. And he's not, at least in this, in my view of it, he doesn't seem terribly celebratory in him finding finally what he should have been looking for all along.
No, there's almost a sense of regret.
Yes.
And I think that's healthy. That's what I love about the Bible is that you get honesty and you ask the question, why would God inspire through his Spirit Solomon and include that in scriptures? You know, you read Proverbs, like you said, and a lot of people, I did this for years until someone said, don't read Proverbs as if they're their promises. And because it kind of reads that way. When you read through Proverbs, you're like, if you do this, it equals this. And if you do this, it equals this. And and you make these good decisions, these good things will come.
Yeah, it's very transactional.
It's very much so. And then you realize, oh my gosh, there's a difference between a proverb and a promise. A proverb is a general principle that doesn't guarantee anything, but it does give you, it sets your odds up better for outcomes. But we tend to want to have the promise instead of a proverb. And the promise that God gives us is really everything. He promises everything in this life is going to pass. And so, but life in him, he promises, is where we find true meaning, true purpose. I was sitting, this is interesting. You're at an age now, we both are, where I've been told that we are in kind of the sweet spot. And what people tell me this is, being in our age, we've lived enough life to have enough experiences. I mean, you're even going through a season right now, some really, really challenging, hard things. And it's rewiring your perspective on stuff. And you'll be able to speak into other people's lives out of that. There's something that only experience tells you, right?
Yeah.
Experience does two things. It allows you to come back, look through your life, through the highs and lows. That's what experience is. And you can reframe perspective. And I remember as a young man, people asked this question, what would you say to the 20-year-old version of yourself? Knowing what you know now, what would you tell them?
I'd beat the crap out of him.
So that's what I didn't prepare you for this, but it just hit my mind because I was asked that, I don't know, sometime recently, somebody said, if you were to go back and talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you say? Knowing the perspective you have now, kind of like Solomon, what would he tell his younger self? That's kind of where I was going with that. Oh. If Solomon can talk to younger Solomon, what would he say? Coming from his ecclesiastical, where he's sitting, we have a perspective on life that we can reframe things and reframe a lot of stuff. And I was sitting with a guy named Luis Palau, who is a legend, evangelist. And we were at a retreat. We were actually at the Antone. It was a group of pastors, small group of us. And it was in the last, I think it was in the last 2 years of his life. And, this is a guy that's been faithful, just a legend for God. And we sat in this room and we asked him, hey, your age now, you're this wise sage, you've lived all this great life, family, and all this kind of, he kind of boiled things down in a very simple way. And he said, life comes down to two things: love God, love others. Like, wait, no, give me something. He's like, we overcomplicate so much. And he's like, people chase a lot of, he had almost that kind of Solomon wise moment of, for us guys that were in ministry, that we were younger, you're chasing after ministry success and building your ministries, and we're going to go change the world. And, that's nothing wrong with that young ambition. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, I think we can push ambition in a lot of directions. Ministry ambition, worldly ambition, success, bank accounts, toys, retirement. You just have it all. Status.
Why do we do that?
So I guess, what would you tell your younger 20-year-old self in a Solomon-esque kind of way? What perspective would you, knowing now with some Ecclesiastes thoughts in your head, would you have any different advice?
Yeah, I mean, of course I would. I'm pretty hard on myself, so I always think back. Like, I remember at times when my dad, before he passed, I was thinking back to different things or not working as hard as I should have. And I always meaning usually athletically, because my dad was a coach and I thought that's what I was going to pursue. And at being an athlete, which I did, but when you're a kid, you think you're going pro on everything. Wish I'd have worked harder at that. But also I think, I wasn't as bad as I remember that I was. I didn't do that many stupid things. I think the biggest thing, I kind of look at kids now, and I look at some of the boys that we do breakfast ministry with, high school now going to college, and I look around them once in a while and I think, man, these guys are more mature than I was. And so I don't know if I had necessarily a great maturity, but as far as simplifying things and not looking for your identity in so many different things, I did that a lot. Probably, and probably that was security based. And I don't know how you fix at that age somebody who is insecure. Yeah. But I think I really was. Therefore, a lot of the stupid things, and even my kids have told me, once in a while when they'll have an issue with not even a friend, but they'll tell me a story of a kid that did dumb things or said dumb things online, or can you believe they said this or did this? And I usually say, it's probably just insecure. Yeah. Insecure, immature. Exactly. So I tend to give those kids a pass because of the dumb things I did do at that age. I think it was all born out of insecurity. So I'm not sure how you teach that or coach that in a kid. I wish I hadn't been that way. But as far as taking advantage of opportunities at that age and learning and eventually getting to what I was going to do for a living, I think I did a pretty good job with that. I think the maturity piece, I wish I had been more mature. And I wish I had gotten into, because when I look at some of these kids that were around, and I was not at that age. I mean, yes, I went to church a little bit as a kid and somewhat around some of that stuff, but we didn't have in my high school young life, we just didn't have FCA. We didn't have these things. They probably were around. I probably was. They weren't big, and they certainly weren't, I don't want to say advertised, but known as much to us. But it does seem to me, and I've said this before, when I look at kids now, and even kids then, when I think about the kids who I knew were kind of walking that path then, they seemed more mature. Maybe it's because they had a better perspective on what life is all about. And I don't think I did. So I wish at that age I had a better perspective from a Christ perspective. I wish I'd have known him better. Yeah. I wish I would have... and that's not to say anybody's to blame in that. I wish I would have had a strong Christian mentor. Yeah. Who would have grabbed me and taken me aside and shown me a little more. Not that my parents weren't phenomenal. They were fantastic. But sometimes it takes somebody who's not your dad to be that guy. We've talked about that. So I wish that I would have had somebody at that age, which is kind of why we're doing what we're doing now, because I look back and I've said this a lot of times when I've spoken a few times to FCA at the high school or wherever else, I've said to those kids, and it probably bounces right off them, I wish I'd have had this when I was your age. Yeah. So even if you're sitting here and you don't know what to believe about all this stuff and you're just here for the free pizza, I wish I'd have had this opportunity. Yeah. And it just wasn't, I wasn't told enough about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question in terms of what would I have told myself. But if I could tell myself something then, I would have said, go find that because it's there. Yeah. And I think that would have automatically maybe matured me and given me a perspective that I didn't have at that age. And again, I didn't do a ton of dumb things. I did some stupid stuff. I mean, I think about, we just talked about the 80s, but the stuff then, I laugh now, and this is not to get off into a whole 80s thing. Wow, the stuff we did then.
Oh my gosh.
These days, are you kidding me?
My gosh.
Just in terms of, man, I just think about the silly stuff we did. And for whatever, no, I don't want to get into it, but because it's going to take it in a whole nother direction. That's what I would have told myself. But I mean, just crazy stuff. In a smaller town that I grew up in, your car was everything, and your license, I look at kids now who don't get their licenses right at 16. I was down there at 7 a.m. on my 16th birthday, and I felt like it was absolute freedom. And then the weekend nights with no cell phones and a little junky car with all our friends who all had CB radios in our car, driving around, talking to each other, doing stupid stuff, playing chase, high-speed chase out in the country, trying to find the other car, stupidest stuff. That these days, I can't imagine those videos end up online.
Oh my gosh.
We did so much stuff. So I feel bad in some ways for kids today because some of the stuff we did was really stupid and maybe even borderline criminal, but not as bad as today when somebody gets ostracized and just completely crushed.
You know, that's actually a good point though, because I was sitting here yesterday. I love sitting on the front porch. That's one of my go-to places. My wife, who's amazing, a couple years ago, for Father's Day, she, because I love sitting around the fire. You and I have sat many times, have a good cigar. You know, I love my pipe, sitting around the fire, and just there's something magical around a fireplace. And my time, a lot of times I'll sit on the front porch at night and just me and the Lord sit there, reflect. Anyways, yesterday morning I'm sitting on the front porch. I read my Bible, and I see this kid. By kid, he's probably 13. He comes cruising in front of our house. He's riding his bike, and he's got a backpack and a fishing rod.
Ah, beautiful.
Yeah, and he had this little radio, like kind of attached. He's got music playing and stuff. Remember boom boxes back in the day? We used to have boom, but he was riding his bike by, and I looked at him and went, I'm sitting there going, this guy, it's summer. He's got his fishing rod. He's got his bike, and he's out of the house. He's going for it. And I went, I remember those days. And there was something about not being tied to electronics.
Oh my gosh.
And just, you got to go entertain yourself because you didn't have it at home. Like you say, you had 3 channels, whatever. And it was about, this is the one thing too. It was about adventure. We thinking that we grew up in the days of the Goonies, and it was all about movies were about adventures and exploring and get out and take risks and get dirty and all those things. And you find your buddy with his bike, and then, hey, we're riding down and we're going to be gone, and we're not coming home until the street lights come on. And
oh man,
you just have so many memories on Saturday mornings. Couldn't do this today, that's for sure. But my friend would come over. We'd have our 22 rifles on a Saturday morning.
Absolutely.
We'd walk out in the forest and the fields, and we're shooting everything. And we weren't even doing anything destructive. We weren't shooting cars. We weren't shooting people. We weren't dumb, but we were living the adventure. We were walking through the woods, but
that's our nature.
It was magical, and it was, yes, it's in us to do those things. And I guess for me, that's the advice I would give young people today is don't be reckless and stupid. But what I see in Ecclesiastes is fear God, so live for him. Make sure whatever you do, live for eternity. Don't store up things in this life. They're going to be gone. But I would also say make incredible memories.
Yeah, yeah.
Make incredible memories. Fill the scrapbook. And I'm not talking about having trophies of material things, but I would give the advice, what are you doing with your time?
Yeah.
And I would tell my younger self this. And I have a lot of things that I don't have regrets about. I coached our kids, very present. I don't feel like I was gone all the time. I mean, very active in their life and all that kind of stuff. I don't have those regrets. But I would say to anyone, like, man, life is temporal. And before you know it, you're Hulk Hogan. And I remember in terms of age wise, to where you go, man, life is a vapor. It comes and it goes, and you can't take anything with you, but what you can do is leave legacy behind. And what you can do is make memories that do pass on, that stay, and people go, hey, I remember this, I remember that. And people don't remember stuff that you have. In fact, people don't even remember your accomplishments. They really don't. When I've done so many funerals and nobody gets up and says, and they got promoted this year and then they got this paycheck. Nobody says that crap. What they do say is, hey, I remember Joe. Joe was always encouraging. Joe, this one time, he da-da-da-da, and you kind of go back through pictures and you go, those are memories. Those maybe are the trophies of life. But live for God, live for kingdom, live for Him, and then make the most of the time for things that are more important. That's probably my Ecclesiastes sort of perspective.
And don't waste time. And as a kid, that would have come off to me.
Yes.
Don't waste time as go work harder.
Right.
Well, now what that means to me, stop that.
Yep.
And take a breath.
Yeah.
My wife is very good at that. And I know the one thing, if she could change about me, probably more than one, but it would be slow down, take a look, just enjoy the day, live in the moment.
That's it.
Walk outside and look at the sky, and don't be rushing, and get the phone out of your hand. And I mean, I still do too much of that. And there's times when I am outside by the fireplace and whatever, having a whiskey and a cigar. And it's like, I'm tempted to pick the phone up and check the scores in baseball and the stats of the guys that I went to Oregon State or whatever the guys that I care about, all this stupid stuff. And I'm like, stop. And if the phone buzzes, you don't have to return you're really good at that, by the way. You don't have to return it right now. You don't have to answer that. But what if it's what I've been waiting for? Stop. That I've got to wean myself off of that. And I've become as guilty as the kids from nowadays. But I think back to, you talked about adventure. I'm all wired for adventure. I play adventure in my mind. I play outdoorsman. But how often do I actually do it?
Yeah. I've
got all the fishing gear. But how often do I really go? I've got all the great camo and hunting gear. I go once, which is fine. I've got all of this stuff that I'm ready to do. So I'm prepared for it. But do I actually do it? Yeah. And why not? And then a day will get to an end where, okay, what did I accomplish today? I sat on a bunch of Zoom calls, and then I sent a whole bunch of emails, and then I looked at my phone really hard and expected it to rain. That's what I did. Great day. And when I'm on my deathbed, which who knows when that'll be, am I going to look back at these days and go, okay, that was time well spent?
Wow.
Or am I going to come back from something stupid that I did, or crazy and fun, and even a little scary at times? As kids, man, we certainly did that. We had our share of, oh my gosh, I can't believe we survived that day. And there's just so many, when you were talking about adventure, I think back, I had a fun group in high school, and being from a town that was relatively smaller, and then we were kind of out on the edges of it. So we were kind of rural, but man, night would fall and we would take off and play it was a version of Capture the Flag, but it was also way more destructive than that. And we'd sneak onto the public golf course, which is very wooded, and we'd camo up and face paint, ghillie suits.
Oh yeah.
We'd set up tripwire on trees and try to get the guys to, we did that so much. And we'd come home after those nights and laugh and howl. We didn't have phones. We didn't care. No. The TV was never on.
Nope.
So I do love those. I wish I'd have experienced more of those, and I wish I experienced more of that as an adult now.
We were sitting yesterday, we were grabbing lunch, and so we went to Bridgeport and Joe's Burgers, which is really great burgers. And I've had this epiphany before. It wasn't the first time. And I was sitting there, and it was pretty full because it's a Friday, it's summer, it's sunny, a beautiful day. It's pretty packed, and I saw just tons of people, and we're trying to find a seat. And so we sit down, and I'm sitting there, and I've had this aha observation before, but I look around, and I saw all these people together, but not present.
Yeah.
They were all together. Everybody's looking on their phones. They were all like literally. I've seen this before, but I don't know. I'm thinking through it more deeper now, and I look around. I'm going, everybody here is on their phone.
Next time you're at Costco, seriously, I did this a couple times, and I've done it more. Next time you're at Costco and it's a pretty busy time, and all the lines are 5 deep.
Yeah,
let your eyes drift along the line of the 5 deep, waiting to check out. Every single person will be on there looking at their phone.
Absolutely.
Every single person. And I'm guilty of it too.
No, it's and we all do. I do it. And I had this thought because I was sitting there, and there's a couple texts coming in with some stuff. I'm working on a book project and this, and I mean, important stuff. So I'm not saying it's all just scrolling screen stuff. I mean, it's important things. People trying to, there is an advantage of like, man, we can get a lot done through stuff. We're more efficient. We can, whatever. But speaking of Ecclesiastes, and I sat there and I went, man, if I took the time right now to answer I'm not present with who I'm with.
Yes.
So then now I'm missing this moment. I'm not taking in the Joe's burger smell. I'm not taking in the drift of the breeze that was coming through that I was doing because I was noticing those things differently because I tucked my phone away. What I'm saying is like there was way more things that were happening in that moment that I probably would not have been aware of. And it made me relish it more. And I think that would be my Ecclesiastes thing is how do you relish moments more?
Yes.
Not just move from one moment to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. There might be more layers in something that's right in front of you than we even realize. And I think that's the Ecclesiastes aha, one of them for me.
Yeah, there's at times with where I'm at in my life, and this is not meant to be critical of anybody who's still loves to work and loves to work 10, 12-hour days. But I have friends that I know where I've said, are you who are getting older, later 50s or even early 60s? And I'll say, are you you at a place where you could retire? Oh, yeah. I got plenty of money. I'm like, what are you doing? To me, in my mind, I'm not going to be one of those people.
Yeah.
When I can retire, when I can step off and I know that I'm going to be okay, I'm gone. And it doesn't mean I don't love what I do. Not that I do. I hate what I do. But no, that's not totally true. Only partially. And it's a season. It's a long frickin' season, but it's a season. But I look at some of those people and the people who work and they're in some people say, hey, it's a blessing to work and I look what I'm doing and I get that. So I'm not being critical, but for me personally, I look at that and go, gosh, you could go do all that and take off for the day and go to the beach and drive to the mountains and go fish in a lake and you don't have to worry about necessarily providing because that's already kind of taken care of. Wow. Mm-hmm. I wish you did. Mm-hmm. And it's okay if you don't, but I wish you did.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, we bounced all around. I think to put a cap on it, just the Ecclesiastes part of this, I read it with an open mind when you go into it. And it's not long. It's not a long book. Read it a few times because I think you'll start to understand where it comes off as maybe a touch pessimistic. You'll pick up on like I said, the melancholy feel of it, of a guy who's gotten to the end. And I think the Hulk Hogan comparison was perfect considering what I've seen from him, especially on social media this week. Guy who's seen it all, done it all, kind of came to the same spot Solomon did. Mm-hmm. I've been chasing the wind and I'm going to stop wasting time.
That's good.
And Hulk was just to that point. But maybe this is his platform.
Yeah.
Maybe this is his legacy now.
Yep.
And I hope that it is.
Yeah.
Because, he's a guy who was criticized some and lived this flashy life, and pro wrestling isn't always, especially now, insanely family friendly. But everybody even is. but when we were kids, it wasn't that way. Lastly, they weren't all these
Yeah.
Hulk was, when he got to that stage, it was the tan, ripped up, big, huge guy. A lot of the Portland wrestling guys looked like dudes that would be, you would not, not exactly athletes. No. It's a dude wearing spandex tights and you're like, holy cow, and boots.
A little Nacho Libre out there.
Oh, yes. But man, was it beautiful. I miss those days. I know we sounded like two old men reminiscing today. But check out Ecclesiastes, and then you'll go watch Hulk Hogan videos, and you'll understand why we came up with this episode. We love you, and we thank you, and we'll see you again next time on Vertical Pursuit. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.